So I have a lot of things that I've thought of, and most of them are stupid, but some of them are interesting. So if you're even stupider than me, or more interesting, you'll listen to me talk about them for extended lengths of time. I'm not selling a course, I'm selling my randomness and exuberance. So let's go. So nowadays, the way society is different than the way it used to be. Like, society is not poetry anymore. Society is just, it's sort of like binary codes. Because you have, in the old days, you'd have so many different ways of living or things to choose from. What are the old days? I don't even know what I'm referring to as the old days, but I'm talking about like previous to the year 2000 or before. Here's the thing, I don't want to be somebody who is, what's the word, nostalgic or retro-oriented, you know, longing for the past. I wish new things were just as good. I hate having to buy vintage because new stuff sucks. I'm just making observations as to the different aesthetic and philosophical qualities of life back in those times when things had more variety. So nowadays, certain things have become more complex, but certain things have become simpler. What's become simpler is the way you purchase things and what your purchasing choices are aesthetic-wise. You don't have access to much variety. Despite the fact that we have this proliferation of shopping choices, they all seem to be offering more or less the same thing. You don't have the same choices of velvet blue jackets that you did in the 70s and the 80s. You don't have the same choices of fabrics. If you're looking for a mohair sweater, you're gonna have a hell of a time. If you're looking for a silk shirt, you're gonna have a hell of a time. It's gonna be made out of some synthetic rayon or polyester or something like that. You can't just go out and buy gigantic stage boots for stomping on a stage like the guys in Kiss. I mean, you could, but there's a level of simplicity to consumption, you know what I mean? And it's like sort of a forced boredom and simplicity. Things are all a lot more conforming to a norm than they used to be, versus in the old days, you could sort of just choose a style that you wanted to have and go and find it, because there was a lot more complexity, which is strange, because if society was more simple, you'd think there'd be less complexity. But with choices in clothing, that doesn't seem to be the case. You can now go on Etsy or eBay and find cool things with flair and character, but they're mostly used from a vintage time. And what about music? Music is interesting because there's something that happened in the feeling of music that kind of left us. And because now music creates, what's the word? Not visceral, but a very mechanical spell on the body and mind. Because now everything is done in Pro Tools, you know, on a computer. Everything is done with perfect metronome clicks, with really advanced limiters and sound compressors, and every channel is multi-checked to very high specifics with autotune and quantizing. So everything's very digital and computerized. Everything's quote-unquote perfect and checked for errors. The sound that's coming out of the finished product from studio monitors is perfect. It's perfect in the sense of mathematical, clinically perfect. And what happens, what you get is a very physical, mechanical sense of drone. Not of drone, but like being in a trance. So the music today is very trance-oriented because it just drones on in a metrically calculated way. And what that does is it makes it easier to listen to in the sense that it doesn't challenge you, doesn't surprise you, but it'll also entrance you more quickly. And since 2015, 2010, you know, even 2008, it's going back to the entrancement route. Like, if you have mainstream artists, back in the day, I mean, even in the 90s, there was artists using a lot of electronic quantization in their music. But so what happened is somewhere along the line, we lost the sort of melodic fluctuations and contours, the sort of harmonic sophistication that a lot of songs in the 60s and 70s and even in the 80s had. Artists back then used to be just way more inventive, chord progressions, harmonies. And so what happens is a song that has less of a challenge to it, but it hypnotizes you faster today. So that's an interesting thought. It's a trend pattern. Is it better? Is it worse? I don't know. In some ways it's better, in some ways it's worse. It would be interesting if they had the technology, say in the time of the Beatles, that they have in recordings today. Like, what would that sound like? What would it sound like if they were recording in 2020, 2025, whatever? I mean, if they had all those tools at their hands and they had selections, much more wide selection of synths, much more wide selection of instruments, patches, compressors, and all that stuff, what would happen to their music, the Beatles? I don't know. If I'm talking about music, I don't know, maybe you're just a consumer and I don't know who you are. Why would you keep watching this video? Probably because I don't know what I have to offer you. I used to recite strange poetry. I'd walk down the street in the middle of the night, maybe not in the actual middle of the night. I'd be drinking at the pub, drinking at an English pub in like Edmonton, Alberta, or New York City or something like that. And I would go down the street with my notebook, because we used to carry a notebook, because your phone, well, there was no phone. So or, your phone was on your wall. I mean, it was wireless, but only within your house. So you carried a tape machine, a recording tape machine. And I also carried a notebook. I would just write poetry as I walked down the street at night after drinking pints of beer at the university campus. And then I would just sit there in the streetlights and I would write like, the air is mine. I breathe deeply and the air is mine. I've said all the things I need to say tonight and the air is mine. I wave my hands through the air like a wizard and the air is mine. I waltz down the street with the shadow of my own thoughts and the air is mine. There are many things that I've done today already, and there are many more things that I will do tonight later on, and the air is mine. So I would just write these poems as I walked down the street. And then sometimes we'd climb up on rooftops and drink bottles of wine. Sometimes there'd be a party at somebody's house. I'm not like from the 60s or something. I'm not like some weird bohemian. We drove decent cars. We had lots of CDs, many. I still have many CDs. Many that I've lost, and cassettes, and I have much vinyl from my father had a huge record collection, mostly classical music. Well, there was a lot of opera in there, a lot of orchestral music, a lot of symphonies. He had the whole Karl Baum Mozart 40 symphonies. We had some of the Wagner Ring Cycle, tons and tons of like Soviet Army chorus and band, and I'm not Russian. We're Canadian. So we're not Eastern. I mean, Hungarian is my background. So my other half is mixed Eastern European. So my DNA test came back like 99% European, and it's like a weird mix of European. It's like a tiny little bit of Finn, tiny little bit of Ashkenazic Jew. Like everybody has like 0.1% Ashkenazic Jew, right? And a bunch of Neanderthal DNA. Like everyone has a ton of Neanderthal, right? And that's a riot. So I have the genes where you can drink milk, you can drink lactose like your whole life. And I have to say that, like, it's weird because dairy, everybody says dairy is so inflammatory. It's funny how you can have an animal where the meat from the animal is the most nourishing, like hypoallergenic food in the world, on the planet. And they say the least number of people get allergic reactions from eating ruminant cows, like from ruminant meat, cows, goat, sheep, lamb, the big ones. So then you have the milk from that animal and it makes everybody sick. Like, I don't get it. It's the same animal. But I suppose, some people would eat the balls of a cow. Maybe you shouldn't do that either. So yeah, the organs are strange, but the milk is toxic and the meat is healing. It's bizarre. I don't know. Is that really true? Maybe milk is healing. And another thing that I do like to do, I like to do these techniques from this guy called Win Wanger. He developed this technique called free noting. So what you do is you just take your thoughts and you free note them. It's very simple. It's kind of like what I'm doing now. You take a topic, like how can I improve my creative writing, or how can I improve whatever the hell, or what to fix a problem with the weather getting too hot in the summer. So what I'm saying is you take something that's bothering you or society, and how can I organize my life better, live my life better, have a more efficient day? There's a simple one. You just go through that and you just pose that question out loud to your subconscious, and then you hit a tape machine. You press record on a tape machine, right? Like, how old are we here? You get your phone, use the recording app, and then you talk, and you set a timer for like 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and you say, all right, how can I fix problem X? And you keep talking faster than you can think, and you outrun the sentinel that's guarding your conscious thoughts. And you get more ideas than you would have possibly thought of. Now, you can do this with music. You can do this with music by yourself or with your friends. You can do it with talking. You can do it with video recording like I'm doing now. You can do it for so many different things in so many different ways. And so what you need to do is, if you want to improve your mind, if you want to improve your life, you need to practice this on a daily basis. And what happens is you come up with, like in several days, you listen back to the tapes or watch the videos back or whatever it is. If you're doing music, you're going to come up with musical patterns that you never knew existed. If you're doing this free noting, you're going to come up with thought patterns and ideas that you never thought you had. You're going to come up with new melodies, new songs. The Socratic method draws forth that which is from within, latently inside you. Or if you believe in like other more esoteric natures of the universe, it's not even a matter of belief. Dean Radin is a scientist who does this non-local consciousness research. I think he's pretty rigorous and thorough. And he says a consciousness, see, a lot of people have said this, Max Planck, it goes back to the shamans, right? Like consciousness is non-local. It's not created in the brain. So the idea that the ideas you're getting in a free note, the musical ideas in an improv tape, when you play the piano or the guitar or the bassoon or whatever your favorite instrument is, maybe it's a kazoo, I don't know. You're going to get these musical ideas that you never thought of. And maybe they aren't yours because maybe it's not local. Maybe Beethoven's Ninth Symphony was just gleaned from the Akashic Records. But then who wrote it in the first place? It gets really deep and strange. So point being, you can get a lot more ideas from doing this activity and this free-form activity. And because consciousness is not likely just created in biological activity in the brain, I think people argue about like microtubules or whatever, but the side point I'm making is that consciousness isn't in a machine, not even one as complex as the human brain. So for them to have the audacity to call what they're making now artificial intelligence, AI, that's hilarious. There's no more intelligence. There's no intelligence in a machine or software. There's no consciousness or sentience. It doesn't matter if it passes the Turing test. So they need to put out legislation where the name artificial intelligence can't be used. It should be called artificial synthesis or artificial development or electronic generation, something more accurate. Since there's nor will there ever be any actual intelligence in it, unless it can actually find a way to interact with the intelligence field as humans do. So back to Wingwanger, the main technique is called image streaming. Image streaming is where you close your eyes, you have your thoughts in your brain, your words coming out of your mouth, and you just daydream inside your brain with your eyes closed. And you ask yourself, what do I see now? You know, I see a giant sock with a crazy cartoon man coming out of it. And he's hopping along on the side of the freeway in this very cartoon-like world where the grass is sort of just painted like an ugly neon green. There's a row of mountains behind him. And he's sort of like a cartoon character with messy curly hair from the 70s. Stick figure, fat potato man. And he's hopping along in a sock. And it's like larger than a car. So this huge, thin, flat sock that this guy's hopping along in. He's like a big dude. And then this guy is up there. I don't know. See a sort of balloon coming in, a hot air balloon coming in, the cover of a book by the guy who wrote Alligator Pie. Okay, so then you keep going, and then the timer goes off, ding, ding, ding. And then suddenly you're going to have all these ideas over a period of 10 to 15 minutes. And what's going to happen to you is that, now this might not happen to you, but what can happen to you is later in the day or in the next few days, you can get some really psychic coincidences that can happen in your life. You'll start to know when it hits you. You'll start to have things where you'll see something in your image stream and then you'll see it the next day or later in real life. It's really interesting. Like I remember one time in my image stream, I saw a book and I went up to a bookshelf and I pulled off a book that said subpoena on the back of it. And then the next day I was in the classroom in college and I went over the bookshelves and just like in my image stream the day before, I went right up to a book that was titled Subpoena and I pulled it off the shelf in real life. Like when you're getting called to court, you know, subpoena. And I just pulled it out and it was like, that was in my image stream the day before. It's a coincidence, a pretty specific coincidence, right? I once had an image stream, and this was September 10th of 2001. I'd like to find that damn tape, but it's in a box somewhere. So on September 10th, 2001, I had an image stream, and we all know what happened on September 11th, 2001. Not to get all historical and doomsday and weird, but like on September 10th, 2001, I had an image stream that said there are giant snakes flying through the sky. The sky turns bright orange. The giant snakes have people riding on them, or they're like dragons. The giant snakes crash into 2 towers in the mountains. I said there were 2 mountains or 2 towers. The sky turns red, and then I said people are falling out of the mountains, and all of the money falls out of the sky, and the mountains crash because the 2 flying dragon snakes crash into these mountains. And that's my image stream from September 10th, 2001. Well, what happened September 11th? And that's what I said the day before. So I've also had a very similar one where I said there was a huge tornado in Oklahoma and Kansas. And my friend lived in Kansas and she called me up and she's like, oh my God, there's a tornado. I was like, literally, I was just seeing that. I mean, yeah, it's tornado season, whatever. Okay, but back then we didn't have 24/7 social media giving you every single update on your phone with Twitter and TikTok. So I've had a lot of those. So I think image streaming is a process that can really open your mind in certain crazy ways. You can invent things with it. And you'll notice after a couple of weeks of doing it daily that you become sharper. You can anticipate what's going to happen next, what people are going to say. You become more efficient at your daily routines. And eventually you just become healthier because your mind is working so much better. So it's probably as powerful or more so than both exercise and meditation. So what's recent? Ozzy Osbourne just died. So we watched this concert last week or 2 weeks ago from Birmingham, England, or wherever the heck he was. And they had a whole metal show all day with Guns N' Roses, Metallica, all these other 80s, 90s, all these metal bands from different eras. And then Ozzy played, Black Sabbath played, and that was the final show. And like literally the final show. Like 2 weeks later, he just suddenly dies. And I thought to myself, like, well, I didn't see that coming. Because, I mean, Ozzy is clearly not a mortal man. Like, I knew he was sick. I never thought he was a mortal man, though. I thought he was some sort of dark demonic priest type entity who was just in human form. And I know he was funny in life. Like, he had a funny sense of humor, and he was a goofball, and he was all an act and stuff. But at the same time, he had a darkness to him. So maybe I misinterpreted that. When I listen to the music, see, there's a difference between listening to the music and the character of the person. Because a lot of the guys that are making like that sort of heavy metal and hard edgy rock, in person they're like major goofballs. Like, that's what the interviews show. I mean, only one of them that I've ever met in person was Slash. But he seemed like a chill dude. Like, even on the Guns N' Roses albums and videos, Axl seems like a bit of a more edgy dude, right? And Weiland, I met Weiland. He was a weird dude. He was just very distant and on his own wavelength, just like kind of just out there. Like, he wouldn't talk directly to you. He would talk about things around you. And then when I tried to have a conversation with him, he was like unfocused. Maybe because I didn't get the sense that he thought he was better than me. It's just that he had so much on his mind that he couldn't carry on a conversation with somebody who wasn't directly related to what he needed to talk about, even though there was no work at the time. They were on tour. It was in Manhattan. We were at a patio in Manhattan when I was talking with Weiland. A friend of mine worked with the band. But when I met Slash, he was very down to earth, very easy to carry on a conversation. He talked to me for hours. He talked to me for the whole night. And he bought the entire table dinner. Then we went to his club. We went to this club called Snitch that I think he co-owned with the other guys from these bands they were all in. And, you know, straight back to the VIP room. I was treated very VIP. But the thing is, these guys that have these weird musical talents and these guys from the earlier times are exalted on pedestals, like to this legendary status. And they're very talented, all these 80s and 70s rockers and stuff like that. But it's something, it's weird because it kind of died out. Like, what we don't have anymore, like, it's really weird because anyone can practice their guitar and play Eruption in their bedroom. Like, anyone can get that good just by learning. But that doesn't mean you're as good as Eddie Van Halen. And it's so weird because the artists that are getting the most play now, like, why in the world? It's because it's not true. We don't have artists that are as good as Eddie Van Halen. We just don't. We don't have artists we don't have songwriters that are as good as the Beatles. We don't have songwriters as good as Duran Duran. We just don't. We don't have it because if there were, we'd hear them. Nobody's putting up. There's not a hidden Duran Duran on Spotify somewhere. Like, show me, go link it. There's not songs that good anymore. There's still good songs, new releases, but nothing anywhere near that good. Sorry, the camera just crashed out there, so where was I? So, yeah, 80s music, Duran Duran. So I say this to everybody. Like, I say this generally to everybody who's giving out musical advice about how to make it in the music business, like on the internet. Like, I follow Jesse Cannon. He's a smart dude. And Matt Bacon, smart dude. And these guys, you know, they know how to promote stuff, and they're connected to everything, like as far as indie music goes. And I would like to think that they would know. Like, you know, they say, you got to put out 60 TikToks per song and blah, blah, blah if you want to make your music happen. Okay, but if somebody wrote one song as good as Hungry Like the Wolf today, as good as Sweet Dreams Are Made of This, as good as Home Sweet Home, I'm just doing 80s right now because that's my favorite decade. Well, we'll talk about that. So if somebody wrote one song as good as any of these major songs, as good as Billie Jean by Michael Jackson, you would hear it. It would go more viral than Taylor Swift. Nobody has written that. Like, and the weird thing is, here's a question. Nobody has written that in the 2010s and in the 2020s, 2015s, and the 2025s, tongue twistery, because society is so structurally different that those kind of intonations of the psyche, they don't exist anymore. Like, you can't get there because society is not structured to allow it. Or is it just generations of musicians just lack the talent that were just free flowing in the 60s and to the 70s and the 80s, maybe a little bit in the 90s, you know? And as you go back in time, people were more musically literate. Kids took piano lessons in the 80s. And in Mozart's time, to hear a new release, you literally had to play it. Unless you were lucky enough to go to a concert, like, hey guys, the new Mozart string quartet is out. Let's get Tom and Jim and Larry together tonight and play it, you know? I'm a huge detractor of grunge and 90s music. I just think it kind of wrecked the party. I don't deny the talent. I deny the aesthetic. Two different things. But anyways, so it's like every week there was like 3 or 4 songs coming out in the 80s that could be better than the greatest song from 2020 to now. Like literally every week. So what is the zeitgeist of why music can't be written that good? Like, can I write music that good? Can I make a song as good as the 80s? I mean, I like Dua Lipa. I like Magdalena Bay. Their sounds, at least. I just heard this band Wet Leg. They were pretty cool. So there's interesting stuff out there. And there's vaporwave stuff out there. That's cool. But that sort of has its own retro, almost 80s-ish throwback. So I love Benson Boone. Everybody hates Benson Boone. It's ridiculous. Why? Because he does backflips and has a mustache and wears corny suits and like sings these simmering melodies to girls that are just romantic, and he's like sweet and cool. Okay, like hate him, you know? Just like you hated Nickelback. Nickelback was one of the best bands of the 90s and 2000s. Isn't it ironic, Alanis Morissette, that if you look back at the 90s, Nickelback aged better than Nirvana? Like, it's more fun to go out and play Nickelback on the jukebox than moldy Seattle grunge. However, Nickelback technically hit like after Y2K, right? So I don't know why nobody can do it. Like, can you figure it out? Can we figure this out? Why the hell can't people write songs well anymore? And I think it has something to do with society. There's, like, you can't get the nerve. You can write great melodies and great damn sound production, like The Weeknd. Beautiful stuff. It's beautiful stuff, The Weeknd. But it doesn't quite get there. There's something about the essence, and it might have to do with this sort of intrinsic consciousness in society that's woven into the actual music, like from that time period, the actual recording. And when you break it down into its constituent parts, it's not going to work. It doesn't piece out. You can't say, oh, it's woven into the melody, it's woven into the recording, it's woven blah, 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 it's woven into the harmonies and the lyrics, but it's sort of just woven into the overall zeitgeist of the structure of society from that time. So the songs are able to sit within this milieu. And I wonder if you're just taking a piece of culture with you, like the consciousness of the 60s was so different from the consciousness of the 70s or 80s, and the songs had a different feel. And people can make Wolf Mothers and Greta Van Fleets or whatever the hell they're called, and it's just not going to be as good. It's not going to sound like the 70s. It's going to sound like the 70s. It sounds like a facsimile of the 70s. The Weeknd sounds 80s-ish. Like, that's cool, but it's not the same. The essence is just not quite there. And the consciousness of the 2010s and the 2020s was really good until like Lady Gaga and Katy Perry and Black Eyed Peas, Kanye West. That was great. And then we had Lana Del Rey. And she did a lot of cool, interesting stuff, and she slowed everything down. And then everybody sounded like her after that. All the female singers, they were slow and kind of depressed and stuff like that. That's about it. That's all I wanted to say to you guys today. Have a great day.